They paused inside the dim evidence vault as the envelope was unsealed, gloves tightening over trembling fingers. The wallet, worn, cold, and faded by decades of dust, emerged under the fluorescent hush, carrying a truth that had outlasted Christmas lights, winter storms, and every unanswered question in that quiet room. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the video. The December case files of 1980 Memphis sat wrapped in brittle edges and the distinctive scent of courthouse dust, a time capsule from a city defined by blues bars, brick alleys, and the low Mississippi winter fog that crept along the riverbank. The victim, 23-year-old college senior Laura Benton, had vanished the week of Christmas break, a time when downtown storefronts glowed with garlands and holiday window displays. Her disappearance received modest coverage at first, overshadowed by seasonal travel, church services, and end-of-year city council stories. Yet the quiet, consistent pressure from her family, along with the chilling incompleteness of the timeline, kept the case from dissolving into oblivion. Laura had last been seen leaving a seasonal retail shift in midtown, crossing a slush-coated parking lot toward her rust-red sedan. Hours later, the vehicle was located 2 blocks from Beale, locked, one tire half sunken in icy runoff, purse missing. The investigation stalled after initial canvassing produced only vague recollections of holiday crowds, gift bags, and commuters rushing home before a forecasted freeze. No body, no suspect, only an enduring absence that stretched beyond New Year's Eve and deep into the next decade. The holiday timing complicated everything. Memphis police analysts noted how Christmas travel patterns diluted witness memory. Unfamiliar shoppers, visiting relatives, students returning from universities, and seasonal workers filling shifts that blurred identification. The River City, illuminated by courthouse wreaths and civic parades, entered January with frost-rimed windows and a lingering guilt that a young woman had simply vanished between festivity and finals week. Case detectives logged weather impacts meticulously. December 20 snow had melted into intermittent sleet, leaving gutters slick and sidewalks fractured with ice. Evidence technicians at the time lacked present-day DNA protocols, relying instead on rudimentary fiber comparisons, shoe impressions, and bank card logs. Laura's last recorded transaction was a fuel purchase off Union Avenue, timestamped 6:42 p.m., December 19. After that, the city swallowed her movements. Police towed her sedan to the central impound yard, where it sat among rows of vehicles dusted in post-holiday frost. Apart from faint smudging on the driver's side glass and a perfectly folded parking stub on the floor, nothing pointed to force, panic, or flight. It was as if the midwinter air itself had erased her. Throughout the early 1980s, missing person bulletins featuring Laura's photo accumulated on telephone poles and church foyer corkboards. Her image, framed by a soft smile and an understated holiday sweater, became a seasonal reminder of an unresolved absence. Each December, local news anchors revisited the story with archival footage of snow-choked Memphis intersections and the quiet desperation of her parents standing outside St. Peter's after late Advent services. The local university retained her transcripts in sealed academic records, awaiting closure that never came. Memorial scholarships were discussed but deferred, as no official determination of death had been declared. Without remains, legal avenues stagnated. Police rotated through divisions, detectives retired, filing cabinets expanded, the cold case unit relocated offices. Microfilm reels preserved every update, yet no breakthrough arrived. Forensic labs improved nationwide in the 1990s, but the sedan, the parking stub, and the sparse fibers remained in storage, their evidentiary value contingent on future technology that had not yet reached Tennessee precincts. When Christmas lights returned each year, the Benton family refrained from decoration, marking the calendar with absence rather than celebration. By the turn of the millennium, Memphis's cold case office received a federal grant supporting evidence digitization. It was then, amid shrinking December daylight and courthouse corridors decorated with municipal poinsettias, that the faded wallet resurfaced. Originally cataloged among miscellaneous personal effects recovered from a Riverfront storage locker in 1981, it had been loosely connected to vagrancy sweeps after New Year's fireworks near the Hernando de Soto Bridge. At the time, no link to Laura was established. The wallet lacked identification, containing only a torn holiday receipt from a midtown bakery and a water-stained note with illegible ink. When technicians carefully pried apart the inner lining in 2002, updated analysis uncovered a latent print fragment preserved in the stitched compartment. The discovery aligned with new AFIS database capacity, enabling more refined comparisons than the original 8-point manual method available in 1980. The fragment, isolated, enhanced, and cross-referenced, returned a partial compatibility with Laura Benton's archived fingerprint card from her college employment form. The match was cautious but compelling, a thread bridging decades of winter uncertainty. Investigators pursued the wallet's origin with renewed precision. Property logs from the early 1980s indicated that the Riverfront locker, abandoned shortly after Christmas 1980, was registered under a temporary address tied to seasonal labor housing near the freight yards. Cross-referencing tenant lists with Social Security employment audits revealed a single individual who vacated without forwarding information by January 5, 1981. Calvin H. Mercer, then a 32-year-old delivery contractor with intermittent warehouse shifts. His employment calendar placed him on delivery routes near Laura's workplace on the night she disappeared. Archived vehicle maintenance forms confirmed that Mercer operated a panel truck with rear storage access, routinely parked along alley deliveries during the height of holiday traffic. Though circumstantial, these alignment points brought the investigation back from archival abstraction into concrete procedural motion. Weather logs recorded freezing rain that evening, complicating street patrol saturation and potentially masking sound near the midtown parking lot. Mercer's file indicated no violent record, only minor municipal violations related to vehicle licensing. Yet his abrupt departure from the housing registry days after Laura vanished triggered a comprehensive review. In late 2003, forensic accountants and cold case detectives collaborated to trace Mercer's interstate movement. His tax records showed a relocation to Arkansas, then to Missouri, aligning with seasonal delivery contracts and agricultural transport schedules that waned after New Year holidays. Witness questionnaires from his former Memphis coworkers revealed vague recollections of Mercer appearing stressed in the final week before Christmas 1980, citing long shifts and icy roads. Background interviews remained cautious, avoiding speculation beyond employment habits. Forensic geospatial mapping, newly implemented by the department, plotted Mercer's known delivery stops over Laura's last documented travel. A faint but discernible overlap emerged in midtown corridors on December 19. Further, truck maintenance invoices suggested interior cleaning shortly after Christmas, inconsistent with routine winter service intervals. The cold case unit, stationed near the courthouse where wreaths continued to hang over marble lintels, authorized a formal inquiry. Mercer, now residing in rural Missouri, received notification. DNA collection, permissible under updated statutes, was conducted respectfully, acknowledging the long span between event and examination. His sample entered the database with routine processing, joining thousands of digitized records awaiting algorithmic comparison. As December 2004 descended with frigid air along the Mississippi, the AFIS-DNA integration pilot project returned its results. Though partial, the genetic markers retrieved from organic residue within the wallet lining aligned with Mercer's profile at a statistically significant threshold. Courts, mindful of evidentiary age, required corroboration beyond biological indication. That corroboration arrived through chain-of-custody validation. The wallet, initially mislabeled as miscellaneous December recovery, possessed stitching fibers matching the fabric composition of Laura's missing purse, cataloged in 1980 records. A manufacturing run number, traced through a defunct Tennessee distributor, placed both items in the same retail shipment sold exclusively in Midtown during early December that year. Metro Archives further revealed an unsent greeting card purchase made by Laura, receipt timestamped to the bakery linked to the wallet fragment. The triangulation, though painstaking and restrained in its conclusions, satisfied the prosecutorial burden long deferred by Winter Quiet. Mercer, confronted with the accumulated findings, accepted a plea encompassing involuntary manslaughter and disposal of remains without reporting, asserting a narrative of accidental vehicular impact amid sleet and low visibility on December 19. Investigators, adhering strictly to verifiable data, confirmed roadway conditions that night-produced skid hazards across midtown loading zones. Mercer's failure to report, his storage of the wallet, and subsequent interstate relocation solidified the case. In early January, as last strands of Christmas garland were removed from courthouse banisters, sentencing was delivered. 12 years confinement with eligibility constraints and mandated disclosure of event details to the Benton family. Closure arrived not with triumph but with the muted cadence of winter wind along Beale Street, where neon lights flickered in post-holiday calm. For the Bentons, the season reclaimed space for remembrance rather than disappearance, the decades of unanswered December nights finally yielding to the quiet certainty of recorded history. In the courthouse archive, the wallet rests sealed, a subdued artifact of winter accountability, preserved among cold files and December photographs that no longer carry mystery, but only documented truth in the measured light of closing time and quiet resolution at last. The winter that followed the sentencing unfolded with the muted solemnity expected of a city long accustomed to balancing celebration with remembrance. Memphis, with its familiar brick storefronts and seasonal brass bands lining Main Street, approached Christmas 2005 under skies that carried the same low, river-fed cloud cover present on the night Laura Benton disappeared 25 years earlier. For the Cold Case Division, the resolution did not erase procedural memory. Instead, it reinforced the necessity of seasonal context when evaluating disappearance timelines. December, with its changing retail hours, visiting relatives, temporary employees, and unpredictable weather systems, often distorted investigative continuity. The Benton file was restored from its archival slumber into academic case studies, forensic symposiums, and internal training modules, not as a spectacle, but as an example of methodical endurance. The recovered wallet, its leather permanently creased by decades of humidity and storage dust, remained sealed in controlled climate, an emblem of the silent persistence required to carry evidence across generational forensic evolution. In early January, after Mercer began serving his sentence, legal clerks documented the final disposition of associated exhibits. The abandoned locker file, once a minor property record largely ignored in the original investigation, became central in procedural reviews examining how overlooked inventory can influence outcomes decades later. Winter interns assigned to the Cold Case Bureau noted that the initial property card listed the wallet among citywide post-holiday impound assortments, lacking any connection to violent or suspicious activity. In 1981, police were saturated with seasonal theft complaints, warehouse trespasses, and unclaimed possessions collected after New Year gatherings along the river. The Benton case was active, yet without remains or criminal designation. The separation between missing person evidence and routine municipal storage obscured the wallet's significance. Only when digital cataloging aligned its discovery date with the known disappearance week did thread lines converge. This procedural reconstruction, now taught in forensic administration programs, illustrates the cumulative effect of improved storage indexing. Memphis archivists, working beneath strings of courthouse lights still hung from December, dedicated extensive hours to revisiting other cases affected by seasonal misclassification. While none bore direct resemblance to Benton's timeline, several were re-tagged to reflect updated classification standards. The Benton case stood as the definitive demonstration that evidence not recognized at the moment of intake may still carry dormant identification value, awaiting scientific advancement rather than investigative intuition. Laura's family, who experienced 25 winters without conclusion, entered the post-sentencing period with measured calm. Their decision to hold a small memorial that December, rather than a large public event, reflected their long-standing preference for quiet acknowledgement over media appearance. The service, conducted at St. Peter's, recalled the early years when Laura's photo sat on the church bulletin board beside poinsettia arrangements and choir schedules. Parishioners who remembered the original disappearance attended, their recollections anchored not in dramatic recollection but in annual repetition. Each Christmas Eve, a candle placed beneath her missing notice; each New Year's Day, prayers for closure. Now, with legal finality delivered, the ritual shifted from uncertainty to remembrance. The church sexton, who had preserved those bulletins across decades, retired the final clipping into an internal archive box marked simply with the year and family name. Meanwhile, the Missouri Department of Corrections documented Mercer's acclamation to custody without incident. His plea submission, recorded in restrained legal language, outlined the winter driving conditions, his transportation schedule during December freight surges, and his subsequent decision to leave Memphis without reporting. He provided a written account of events that avoided speculation beyond the approved narrative, citing road ice, obstructed visibility near alley docks, and panic-induced concealment. Forensic reconstruction teams later confirmed that Midtown's loading corridors, especially on the date in question, presented heightened skid risk due to inconsistent salt distribution and repeated thaw-freeze cycles. The parking lot where Laura vanished had been resurfaced twice since 1980, yet municipal records preserved original schematics indicating a grade incline that, under sleet, created lateral slide potential. The coroner, unable to perform contemporaneous inspection, accepted probability of accidental trauma followed by unlawful concealment and property retention, a classification aligned with vehicular manslaughter under historic Tennessee statute revision. The city press, respectful of the family's preference, issued limited coverage during the next holiday cycle. Articles appeared in December features, positioned beside retrospectives on regional storm patterns and archival civic moments. Journalists emphasized procedural endurance rather than emotional narrative, adhering to the tone established by investigators who maintained that the case's significance rested in evidentiary stewardship rather than public intrigue. Photographs used in the coverage were scanned from early 1980s prints. Laura in a university courtyard wearing a knit winter coat, the downtown storefronts behind her displaying tinsel and ribbon, pedestrians bundled against wind from the river. No sensational framing accompanied her image, only standardized column captions detailing the recovery, conviction, and final legal outcome. Within the Cold Case Bureau, supervisors initiated a winter review model influenced by the Benton resolution. December and early January now served as annual audit points for cross-referencing miscellaneous property logs, seasonal missing person reports, and overlooked holiday storage units. The weather variables that once obscured patterns, streets full of holiday travelers, temporary workforce fluctuations, and compromised witness reliability due to festive distraction, became integral evaluation markers. Officers in training learned to annotate holiday variables with the same precision typically reserved for crime scene indexing. This approach, pragmatic and seasonally attuned, reflected the city's acknowledgement that winter investigations require distinct discipline separate from ordinary calendar months. Memphis itself, a city historically fused with winter river fog and neon-lit nights along Beale Street, absorbed the case back into civic memory with understated reverence. The municipal library, whose basement catalogs once housed microfilm of early news briefs on Laura's disappearance, created a digitized exhibit accessible to accredited researchers. The case materials, properly redacted, illustrated the investigative climate of 1980 Tennessee. Handwritten officer notes, weather advisories, and typewritten inventory sheets listing abandoned property with minimal descriptive fields. The digitization retained the original texture of the documents, complete with smudged ink and fading December timestamps. In the years following resolution, the Benton family reduced public presence gradually, choosing to spend holidays privately, free from the expectation of anniversary interviews. Their home, once devoid of Christmas decor during the decades of uncertainty, slowly incorporated seasonal touches again. A wreath returned to the front door, lights traced the eaves, and the mantel displayed cards from parish friends who had witnessed both the disappearance and its eventual closure. Their remembrance no longer revolved around absence, but around the recorded acknowledgement of their daughter's final December on Memphis streets. They held no illusion of restoring lost decades, yet the weight of each ensuing winter lessened. The city's cold case analysts, now including staff who were not yet born when Laura vanished, approached the file as a model of archival patience. They recognized that resolution arrived not from sudden revelation, but from incremental advancement, digitized fingerprint retrieval, forensic textile identification, interstate work record mapping, and legally structured DNA correlation. None of the methods existed in Memphis when Laura's car was towed from the icy curb. Yet the preservation of her employment fingerprint card, the retention of the wallet, and the cross-departmental indexing combined to carry the case toward lawful conclusion. By the 10th anniversary of Mercer's incarceration, December court records showed no appeals filed. His conduct remained uneventful, his release eligibility monitored under statutory schedule without special review. Benton family representatives made no public statements during that period, and city press maintained distance, acknowledging that the narrative's endpoint had been fully achieved. The absence of extended media coverage underscored the tone with which the case had always been framed. Investigative persistence, civic record-keeping, winter-specific procedural challenge, and the quiet return of certainty long deferred. The Mississippi winter continued its predictable rhythm. Fog over the bridge, frost along the eastbound lanes, and choir rehearsals echoing out of downtown sanctuaries. And amid the annual cycle of garlands, courthouse decorations, and low-lit December storefronts, the Benton file remained preserved, not as a cautionary tale of sensational crime, but as a testament to the capacity of disciplined evidence management to bridge the deepest spans of unanswered winter nights. The decade that followed brought incremental refinements to the way Memphis handled winter disappearances, each adjustment shaped by the lessons extracted from Laura Benton's final path across holiday-lit midtown streets. Cold case officers, observing the quiet reliability of snowfall patterns and holiday transit congestion, began modeling investigative windows according to seasonal behavioral shifts. They noted how students traveled home during finals week, how retailers extended hours, and how alley docks absorbed greater freight volume during December inventory surges. None of these factors had drawn attention in 1980 when Laura vanished, yet each had contributed to the obscured trajectory that investigators later reconstructed. The city understood now that Christmas introduced atmospheric and logistical variables that could not be treated as administrative footnotes, but required structural accommodation. Whether logs from the years surrounding the case were reanalyzed not for retrospective correction, but to construct predictive templates. Memphis, positioned along a humid river corridor with fluctuating winter temperature bands, often faced freezing rain rather than snowfall, creating layered road surfaces that complicated witness timelines and post-event tracking. The sleet that coated the midtown parking spaces on the night Laura disappeared had been recorded by meteorologists at the time as minor precipitation. Decades later, forensic climatology treated such conditions as central components in disappearance probability modeling, acknowledging that even a half-inch of icy film could distort sound, visibility, and braking distance in ways that influenced event sequences without leaving direct physical trace. These insights emerged not through sensational detail, but through procedural patience. Law enforcement training expanded to include seasonal retention drills, emphasizing the handling of objects recovered from high-traffic holiday zones. Officers were instructed to determine whether misfiled items could be linked to larger investigations before assigning them to routine inventory status. The Benton wallet, once mislabeled as insignificant vagrancy property, transformed into the city's enduring case study in the importance of labeling discipline. Detectives entering the force in 2010 and 2011 learned the case not as an emotional tragedy, but as an archival map demonstrating how evidence storage, chain of custody precision, and database compatibility eventually intersect. In their annual December review sessions, they traced the sequence from water-damaged leather to forensic textile match, from partial fingerprint card to database alignment, acknowledging that no advancement would have mattered had the object been discarded. The Missouri facility where Mercer served his sentence issued routine quarterly reports, free of incident, marked only by standardized custodial observations and medical check records. His presence in the system produced no public commentary after the initial resolution year. Memphis journalists, respecting the family's long-standing preference for discretion, avoided anniversary profiles. Holiday broadcasts returned to typical seasonal subjects, weather advisories along I-40, church choir preparations, and municipal food drives. It became clear that the Benton case, unlike others that invite prolonged speculation, reached completion in a manner that left no narrative void requiring public interpretation. The legal conclusion had been delivered, the evidentiary chain confirmed, and the winter timeline reconstructed. During archival modernization, technicians digitized the property intake cards from late December 1980 through early January 1981. These included the original locker seizure forms, handwritten in faded ballpoint ink, noting objects collected after holiday gatherings. Among them were routine items, scarves, umbrellas, receipt booklets, and the wallet whose internal compartment preserved the latent fragment that eventually aligned with Laura's employment record fingerprint. When digitized, the handwriting revealed faint notations that earlier reviewers had considered irrelevant, a date stamp matching the afternoon of December 23, and a location tag referencing the river storage unit where holiday overflow often accumulated. The lighting conditions under which officers tagged such items, working through seasonal cold and limited staff availability, were later incorporated into evidence handling protocols to ensure winter intake precision. Although the Benton family rarely spoke publicly after sentencing, their quiet reintegration into holiday routine was noted by those close to them. Christmas Eve services, once marked by the absence of participation, saw their return, not in front pew seating, not in ceremonial acknowledgement, but in simple attendance among the congregation. Their home, from the street, resembled any other in the neighborhood when December lights were strung across door frames and porch railings. Friends who had witnessed the deterioration of festive observance during the decades of uncertainty understood that their gradual re-engagement represented not celebration, but balance. The resolution allowed memory to coexist with season rather than eclipse it, a transformation visible only to those who had watched the winters accumulate. Forensic scholars in later years revisited the case for its illustration of technological packing rather than human drama. The information that solved the mystery had existed from the first winter hour: the fingerprint card, the purse fabric logs, the weather advisories, but could not be aligned until methodology caught up. Students studying the case noted that the chain of evidence did not change, the interpretive tools did. Memphis became a standard reference point for how cities with high holiday mobility must treat winter disappearances with layered observational rigor, recognizing that snow, sleet, and seasonal turnover disrupt the linearity of witness recollection. Laura Benton's path from retail exit to vehicle location was short in geography but long in investigative duration. Local precinct officers continued to honor the case through procedural practice rather than commemorative display. No plaques, no dedicated interview rooms, no public monuments were created. Instead, winter intake rooms were upgraded with enhanced cataloging stations, atmospheric controls to prevent moisture degradation, and redundant digital indexing. Every December, in the same courthouse where wreaths still appeared over marble railings, inventory audits proceeded with measured intent. The Benton wallet remained in sealed containment, unremarkable in appearance yet central in training lectures that emphasized the quiet authority of preserved objects over speculative pursuit. The Mississippi River, carrying the same winter fog that had once concealed pathways and dulled street sounds, continued its seasonal movement beside the city. Barges moved slowly under frost-hazed mornings, and streetcar bells echoed across brick corridors where holiday banners hung in muted colors. Memphis did not memorialize the case beyond its lawful conclusion. Instead, it absorbed it into procedural memory. The absence that once defined a series of Christmases now existed only in files, court records, and the steady assurance that no loose thread remained. In this manner, the Benton case settled into its final decade, not as a lingering mystery but as a closed record of winter method, evidentiary endurance, and the absolute clarity that arrives only when every archived detail aligns. Through 40 subsequent holiday seasons, the city accepted that justice, though delayed by sleet, storage tags, and misfiled leather, had arrived with the same quiet inevitability as December frost collecting on courthouse steps. In the final span of winter reflection that surrounded the Benton case, Memphis learned to regard December not simply as a festive interval, but as the most delicate axis in which movement, memory, and municipal procedure intersected. The city's investigative units, courthouse archivists, clergy members, and long-standing residents each carried recollection of the 25 Christmas seasons during which Laura Benton's absence hovered at the edge of holiday preparation. When closure arrived, it did not present itself as triumph or catharsis, but as an atmospheric shift so subtle that only those who had counted every snow-laced year could recognize it. The Benton investigation, resolved through unhurried forensic alignment rather than revelatory confession, demonstrated that the coldest cases often thaw not through sudden illumination, but through gradual archival precision. The wallet, unremarkable in color and worn by moisture, had remained still for decades before technology finally spoke on its behalf. The city calendar turned through another series of Decembers. Lights were strung across Beale Street in familiar gold and red. Church choirs rehearsed carols without the undertone of prayerful uncertainty that once shadowed their hymns. The courthouse continued to place wreaths above its entry columns each season, maintaining traditions that predated both the disappearance and the resolution. In this continuity, Memphis made no visible alteration to commemorate the Benton closure. Absence had been replaced not by ornament, but by equilibrium. The past could remain in its proper place, safeguarded not by nostalgia but by fact. The Missouri correctional reports progressed into their concluding chapters as Mercer approached the end of his sentence. Documentation remained clinically consistent. Routine evaluations, participation in vocational assignments, no disciplinary incidents reported. His file reflected the procedural completion of a legal trajectory that began on frozen December asphalt in 1980 and ended within the structured environment of a facility hundreds of miles north. He was granted conditional release under standard supervision parameters. The Benton family, informed through official notice, offered no statement, nor did the local press seek one. Memphis observed the development without commentary. Its attention had already shifted to routine holiday briefings, weather advisories, flu season warnings, and municipal service schedules. What lingered in institutional memory was not the man, nor the sentencing, but the quiet revelation that ordinary objects, wallets, receipts, unclaimed storage items, can hold unresolved winters within their fibers. That awareness shaped training manuals, property intake signatures, and interdepartmental December audits. Investigators learned to consider how the season itself reshapes evidence, how sleet erodes footprints, how crowds compress witness memory, and how temporary workers complicate identification timelines. Laura Benton's final recorded path through midtown retail corridors became fundamental reading for each new officer assigned to cold case rotation during winter months. They absorbed not her personality, nor her biography, but the procedural imprint she left, a record of how absence must be documented with the same fidelity as presence. St. Peter's continued its Christmas Eve services, their sanctuary warmed by candlelight and evergreen. The choir loft, which once overlooked a congregation keenly aware of the missing young woman whose photograph rested near the altar, now held no physical marker of her decades-long vigil. The church had chosen the quietest possible closure. Bulletin boards were cleared, memorial candles retired, and her name moved from prayer lists to archived intercession records. Parishioners who had lived through the long stretch of uncertainty understood that remembrance did not require repeated invocation. The community that had stood with her family across every December of unanswered grief now allowed them to carry memory privately, untethered from public ritual. Forensic institutes later cited the case not for narrative intrigue, but for evidentiary longevity. Academic journals referenced the wallet's preservation environment, noting how humidity controls, sealing protocols, and non-invasive reopening procedures extended the viability of latent material beyond its expected lifespan. The Benton record became a quiet benchmark in national seminars on cold case resurrection, not as a headline, not as caution, but as a technical example of winter-linked investigative patience. Memphis, in its measured acknowledgement, retained only what mattered, the lesson that holiday months must be treated with investigative elasticity. Officers learned to account for traveling populations, seasonal hires, fluctuating delivery routes, and weather systems that alternate between freeze and thaw in the span of hours. December was no longer categorized merely as a festive peak, but as a specialized forensic landscape requiring unique calibration. Every sleet pattern, every fog bank rolling off the Mississippi, every early evening darkness became part of the investigative lexicon. Laura Benton's academic records were formally transitioned from pending status to completed archive. The university registrar, who had maintained her file across changing office locations and system upgrades, entered the notation that allowed her transcript to rest. Financial aid documents, student housing logs, work schedules, and internship plans, all once held in suspended administrative posture, were placed into sealed storage with finality. The campus that had held winter vigils during her first missing year now held only quiet acknowledgement. Younger students, generations removed from the event, walked past library windows lit with December garland, unaware of how the case once paused exams, chapel services, and student senate meetings. The institution, true to its educational function, allowed awareness to remain in the hands of those who study criminal procedure rather than those who pursue seasonal celebration. The Mississippi continued its steady winter current, moving beneath bridges lined with frost. Barges navigated its muted expanse with predictable rhythm. Downtown lampposts cast their light over sidewalks where, decades earlier, missing person flyers had once collected in clusters. No such postings remained. No unresolved notice persisted. The city's bulletin boards returned to routine holiday calendars, winter shelter schedules, Christmas parade routes, and announcements for New Year's municipal closures. Memory shifted from public display to private recognition. Ultimately, the case concluded without echo or amplification. Its significance resided in the completeness of its record, the lawful delivery of its findings, and the unassuming finality that replaced years of seasonal uncertainty. Memphis did not transform its holiday customs, rename streets, or enshrine plaques. It simply resumed winter as winter, cold air, river fog, muted brass bands, evergreen wreath, and neon reflections on damp asphalt. Laura Benton's December, once an open space in local chronology, no longer required retelling. It existed in police logs, academic study, and sealed evidence trays, all meticulously preserved and no longer tasked with answering for absence. The holiday streets along which she once walked, the college office where her employment card had been stamped, and the parking lot where her sedan was found under thin layers of slush, returned to ordinary winter function. In the end, closure meant that December in Memphis could proceed without shadow. Lights hung, choirs assembled, frost formed on courthouse steps, and the river carried forward. No unanswered questions broke the stillness of the season. The wallet that had once rested unnoticed in a forgotten locker remained sealed, its purpose fulfilled. And the city, in its winter quiet, understood that justice, when it finally arrives, does not alter the landscape. It simply restores the calendar to its rightful shape, allowing the next Christmas to be just a Christmas and nothing more.